Welcome, everybody. I know we're just waiting for last couple of folks to hop on. So great to see you all. And we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm Jonathan Dworkin, Director of Policy and Communications at NewDEAL. We have a great group of leaders joining us to dive into the COVID relief bill that passed in the House over the weekend, and we will specifically make the case that the Senate must maintain the funding allocated to address the needs of state and local governments. A quick note for those who are new to the New Deal, we are a selective network of the most innovative state and local elected officials from across the country who are pro-growth progressives, leaders like Senator Liias and Mayor Franklin, who will speak shortly. Our alumni include Pete Buttigieg, Stacey Abrams, Cyrus Habib, and of course, Congresswoman Strickland. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. We will take questions after all of the speakers have had a chance to make opening remarks. If you have a question, please indicate that in the chat and I will call on you. Please also feel free to type out your questions there. In addition, we will be making available a recording of today's event. We are also giving members of the media the ability to record the event directly by clicking the record button at the bottom of your screen. We just ask that you please remain muted when you are not speaking. State and local officials in Washington and throughout the country are on the front lines of the response to the pandemic, from keeping people safe to ensuring people can stay in their homes to supporting businesses hardest hit by this crisis. The bill passed by the House, the New Deal feels, includes vital funding to prevent layoffs in state and local government and to help these leaders, our leaders, to be successful. It also includes critical provisions that are different from what was in last year's CARE Act. It ends the requirement that governments spend stimulus funds on new initiatives, allowing them to replace lost revenue, and it makes funds available to more cities, especially cities with fewer than 500,000 residents. I know that all the New Deal members are just so grateful for the work of House Democrats and especially the New Democrat coalition in fighting for legislation that meets the scale of the challenges facing states, counties, and cities across the country. The funding approved by the House is so vital to fulfilling President Biden's charge to build back better, and we really hope the Senate will send it to the president's desk. With that, let's get started with someone who is a great friend to New Deal and who has always been a tremendous listener and advocate supporting the needs of state and local officials, New Democrat Coalition Chair, Congresswoman Delbene. Congresswoman, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm Suzan Delbene, chair of the New Democrat Coalition this Congress. And New Dems, as we're called, have been aligned with President Biden on the trail and in the White House. That's because the New Dems, like the New Deal leaders, are focused on getting things done. We are about finding pragmatic, innovative solutions to complicated issues. The New Democratic Coalition is made up of 94 forward-looking Democrats in the House of Representatives, making it one of the largest ideological caucuses in the House. We represent the expansion of the Democratic Party beyond our urban base into purple districts, and we are key to holding the majority. With thin majorities in the House and in the Senate, building coalitions around key legislation is critically important, and New Dems want to get to yes. We recently unveiled our agenda for the first 100 days of the 117th Congress, which is focused on ending the pandemic, creating jobs, and solving the challenges of the 21st century. This includes addressing issues like healthcare, infrastructure, climate change, and immigration. The coalition, with its size and weight behind these forward-looking policy ideas, will work with colleagues on both sides of the aisle, committee chairs, congressional leadership, and the administration to achieve results. My district, where we had the first known cases and deaths of COVID-19, has been combating this virus for over a year now. Communities in my district and nationwide need more support, and that is our top priority. The House passed the American Rescue Plan this weekend, which is comprehensive legislation to help end the COVID-19 pandemic, provide economic relief to workers and families, safely reopen our schools, and get Americans back to work safely. With a pandemic still raging and weak economic data, This bill meets the moment of this crisis to support our workers, families, small businesses, and the public health response. Included in this package is a one-year expansion of the child tax credit to provide families with regular payments and make the credit fully refundable, which allows lower income families access to the full benefit. This provision is modeled after the American Family Act, a bill I introduced along with Representatives DeLauro and Torres, which would permanently expand the credit and lift an estimated 4 million children out of poverty. New Dems helped shape the American Rescue Plan, including with New Dem endorsed provisions like a national recovery strategy, including funding for testing and vaccine manufacturing and distribution, and the longest extension of emergency unemployment insurance benefits in any COVID-19 package yet. We know more must be done. As this package is considered in the Senate, New Dems are pushing for the extension of emergency UI benefits through the end of the fiscal year, through the end of September, automatic stabilizers and additional investments to create equitable growth in distressed communities and spur new centers of innovation across the nation. House passage of the American Rescue Plan advances the first pillar in the New Democrat Coalition 100-day agenda: end the pandemic and get people back to work. We have a long road ahead of us, but I remain committed to working with federal as well as local leaders to do just that. And now I want to turn it over to one of our newest New Dems and NewDEAL alum, fellow Washington Congresswoman Marilyn Strickland.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Jonathan, for hosting us here. From City Hall as a New Deal leader to the halls of Congress as a New Democrat, it is my honor to be here today. And one of the things that I love being part of this network is really about pragmatism, getting things done, and delivering for the people that we represent. And what's so cool about this coalition that we have is that we're not a monolith. We are Democrats, but we range in ideology. But the thing that we share most is that we have values of getting people back to work, of equity, of opportunity, of inclusion, and making sure that any economic recovery that we support is going to be one that is inclusive. I think about the values that I learned as a New Deal leader, and that includes being bipartisan without compromising your values, collaboration, listening, again, and just being very practical about what we want to do. On the 9th of February, I was proud to sponsor a letter, and I had about 50 of my colleagues sign on with me. And this was really imploring that we make sure we maintain the $350 billion that is in the American Recovery Plan to ensure that local government, tribal government, and counties are going to get access to these funds. And as someone who came from local government, I fully understand that a population threshold of 500,000 in population isn't going to cut it, and it will exclude a lot of communities. So I'm glad to see that the provision includes places for populations of 50,000 or more and 50,000 or smaller, because this has to be an inclusive recovery. I think about some of the rates in Pierce County, in Thurston County, and in Mason County that I represent in the 10th District of Washington State, and people are still out of work. Small businesses are still struggling. And so by providing help to local government so that they can decide how this money is used, we can keep more people employed. I also want to emphasize too that a lot of thought and care went into this package. It's big and it's comprehensive, but when your house is on fire, you have to use every resource you can to put the fire out. I'm so honored to work with leaders like Suzan Delbene to work on this package. And I tell folks that what's so cool about being a New Democrat is that this is the shop where policy actually happens in Congress. This is a shop where we write things and they're more likely to pass and become laws. So it's my honor to be here today. And again, thanks for everyone for joining us today. And let's just get this passed. Let's have our friends in the Senate work with us to make this happen. And let's get America back to work in an equitable way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman and Congresswoman Delbene, for those great remarks. I want to now hear from two New Deal leaders who are on the front lines fighting this pandemic, fighting the economic crisis in Washington State, starting with Senator Marko Liias. Senator, so great to have you with us.
Thanks so much, Jonathan, and thanks to our friends at New Deal for organizing this opportunity. It's also such a pleasure to join two fantastic members of our congressional delegation. I've been a longtime admirer of Congresswoman Delbene since she worked with us in state government a decade ago, and was a local elected official at the same time as Mayor Strickland, now Congresswoman Strickland. So it's a delight to see you both. And of course, Mayor Franklin is one of my local elected officials. It's a joy to virtually be with all of you. You know, what we've seen in this pandemic response is twofold. First, we've seen state and local revenues decline and flatline at the same time that needs for essential public services have gone up. So it's not just that our revenues have declined, but more of our residents, more of our neighbors need essential services in this critical moment. So when we talk about state and local relief, we're talking about providing essential public services to neighbors and friends in our communities. And I'll just say in state government, about 60% of what we do in our budget is education, from birth to college, K-12, and everything in between. 30% of what we do is essential human services, healthcare, housing supports, access to families that are struggling. So 90% of our state budget goes to those two core functions that are critical to helping families in this moment, both helping families that are struggling, but also we see the statistics that the economy is not going to recover in exactly the same form it was before. We have to have pathways to opportunity. We know that economists say as many as a quarter of the jobs that have been lost may not come back in the exact same form. We need to make sure that community colleges, technical programs, certifications are available to get folks retrained and back into the economy quickly. So this funding that the House approved, and we're so excited that our senators from Washington will take a lead on getting it through the Senate here shortly, is critical to helping the state of Washington both partner with our federal partners, also with our local partners to provide those essential public services right now. And in the state legislature, we have worked rapidly to get the previous assistance out as fast as possible. We broke speed records in our session and got $4 billion in aid to the governor's desk within our first month of convening for this session, because we want to get these dollars to where they need to go as quickly as possible. Really excited at this partnership, and just want to emphasize that every single dollar that we receive and support, we are pushing out the door to help families and neighbors who are struggling in this moment to build back, not just build back what we had, but build back better as we move forward. And excited to partner with Congresswoman Delbene, Congresswoman Strickland, and delighted that one of my mayors, Mayor Franklin, is here, just really demonstrating the importance of this federal, state, and local partnership to help our families and our communities in this moment.
Thank you so much, Senator, for being with us. I know you're just coming from the Senate floor, so thank you for making the time, getting on, and we know you may have to jump off at any moment. We're going to turn now to Mayor Franklin from Everett. I will make a note again for reporters on the call. If you have a question, please flag it for us in the chat, and I will call on you after Mayor Franklin's remarks. So important, of course, to hear the city perspective. And Mayor, so great to have you as a New Deal leader and to have you today joining us for this event.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Jonathan. And thank you, Representatives Delbene and Strickland, for your advocacy, your hard work and leadership. And thank you, Senator Liias. Really appreciate your local leadership, and definitely your remarks really resonate with what I have to say here. Also, a thank you to the New Deal for prioritizing this issue. I wanted to take a minute to provide the city perspective and share why the American Rescue Plan is so important to Everett. We're grateful that the direct assistant is included in the plan, because this type of assistance that goes directly to our city is desperately needed now. Cities are on the front lines of this pandemic. Everett had the first reported case of COVID-19 in the country, so we've been dealing with this from day one. And since the disease arrived in our community in January 2020, we've been working around the clock to keep our residents and businesses safe. And doing so has been an ever-evolving effort as we continue to learn more about the disease and how best to address it, and it has required extensive city resources. Communities like Everett have felt the impact of COVID-19 very deeply. The lives lost have been devastating to our local families and everyone in our community. And the financial impact has been great. Our local economy took a huge hit. Our general government revenues alone were down more than $9 million last year. The loss of revenue prompted emergency budget reductions and very painful decisions that we had to make for our city. We had to cut a number of city services, such as our senior center and our pool facilities, and made deep cuts throughout our city departments. Citywide, we lost about 100 employees, and Everett businesses have felt the pain too. We're home to Boeing and other aerospace companies, which have been deeply affected due to the decline in air travel. The majority of job losses in our region are in the aerospace sector. And small local businesses, who are the heart and soul of our community, have been shuttering their doors and are barely hanging on. Residents too are struggling. Every day I hear from families who are worried and anxious, whether it's about losing their job or not being able to pay their bills. Many are having a hard time keeping up with their utilities, rent, or mortgage, and landlords in turn are feeling an increased financial burden and are struggling to keep up. As a city, we've had to figure out how to do more to meet the growing needs of our community while having less capacity and fewer resources to do so. This is in addition to maintaining core city services such as public safety, police, fire, public works, running a water utility, keeping roads in good condition, transit, parks, and other areas without the necessary revenue to do so. And all this while providing food assistance, shelter, testing, and protective equipment in the midst of this pandemic and one of the most challenging economic times that our city and state has ever faced. We've been grateful for the small amount of federal CARES funding we've received thus far, passed to us from the state and county. We used some of those dollars to award $1.8 million in grants to support 140 local businesses and organizations, and we also administered $800,000 in funding for rental assistance and housing stability. And some dollars also helped us pay for the many COVID-related expenses we as a city have incurred. This aid has provided vital support to our families, local businesses, and organizations who've been hit hard by the pandemic, but it certainly is not yet enough, and more is needed to help them survive. That's why additional federal assistance would help Everett and other cities across our country recover and help our communities. Previous bills did not include this direct aid to smaller cities like Everett, as we shared. And we had to make painful decisions and budget reductions to ensure that our community was taken care of. The direct assistance for cities is essential for ensuring that we can continue to provide emergency assistance while also helping lead our community's economic recovery. Therefore, I too urge the Senate to pass the House's bill and include this critical direct assistance. I really want to thank the New Deal, Representatives Delbene and Strickland, for your leadership in the House on passing this, and thank you to the New Deal for prioritizing this and inviting us to speak on this important issue today. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Again, for folks, I know we've got a few minutes for questions. Please, if you have a question, either leave it in the chat or just flag that you have a question and we will call on you. I see the first one from Jerry Cornfield about please clarify how the rules on the use of funds differs from previous packages and replacing lost revenue. I know we've got some text from the new bill, but also want to see if Congresswoman Delbene or Congresswoman Strickland, if you want to take that on as well.
I think, first of all, I think Mayor Franklin highlighted how important these resources are, and we wanted to make sure there were resources that were going directly to cities. Washington State distributed that, not all states did, so that was important. We also wanted to make sure that there was flexibility for cities in using those dollars because we heard from many cities, from the CARES dollars, some places where they were unable to use those dollars. So that was an important priority for us in putting this package together. And maybe Congresswoman Strickland, as a former mayor too, can talk a little bit about that, as well as Mayor Franklin.
Right, so every city is different in size, in tax base. And so having the flexibility to allow the cities to determine how they want to use this is really important. And, some cities rely heavily on one form or another. And in some places they have, four primary tools. They have B&O tax, they have utility tax, they have property tax and sales tax. And, during the pandemic, clearly some of these taxes went down and the revenue went down, but the expenses to run government, especially during a pandemic, went up. And so there was something very unbalanced about this. And so by lowering the threshold of population where cities are eligible to get the funds, giving it to them directly and not putting so many restrictions on them, we're allowing the local leaders who know their communities better than anyone else to determine how best to distribute those funds.
Yeah, I would just add every community is different, as Congresswoman Strickland shared, and the city of Everett, for example, was hit extremely hard because of the loss in revenue in aerospace. And so our community had a much higher loss than a community that didn't have that same aerospace sector of the economy. And so the lost revenue is key. We still have to pay for all of those core city services with ever decreasing revenue when the needs, as Senator Liias also shared, continue to go up. So I think the flexibility is vital, because then the cities who know their communities and know the needs in their community most closely can address that directly. So again, really appreciate the way this is crafted currently.
Mayor, thank you so much for that comment. And I'll just read for the media's sake. I know the specific text of the bill allows the funds to be used for revenue that was lost, delayed, or decreased as a result of the emergency. So that is the text from the bill. Before we go to the next question, Senator Liias, I don't know if you wanted to just make a comment on the importance of the flexibility of the funding.
Yeah, I really appreciate the work that our delegation is doing to give us the maximum flexibility in implementing this. We are seeing, the pandemic response is very dynamic, and what we need from month to month shifts. And since it takes some time to get these dollars to us, I think giving us flexibility to respond to the specific conditions that we're facing at any moment in time is so valuable. And I see an upcoming question talking about kind of unspent dollars. Part of what our state has tried to do is to make sure we're holding funds to release over time, so that as folks are dealing with lost rent and other issues, that we've got the resources in a staged way to meet the need throughout the course of the year. And so I do think providing that flexibility in how we use the dollars, but also in the timing of it, means that we can continue to provide the ongoing relief that folks in our communities need. And I appreciate that the delegation recognizes that as city council members, as mayors, as the state legislature, we're elected to represent our communities and to address these issues together. And so we're doing our best job of exercising our judgment, of doing what needs to be done in the moment, and the flexibility from Congress to help enable that is really critical in this moment. Thinking about how much has changed over the course of the last 12 months, what we know now is very different from what we knew just a few months ago, and giving us the flexibility to respond in real time is really helpful.
Thank you, Senator. And I guess just following up on that, you're responding already to the question about Republicans have argued that some of the CARES Act money being unspent, and that's a reason to not support even more money to local governments. Maybe start with our members of Congress, Congresswoman Delbene, just if you have thoughts on what you've said in response to some of the Republican arguments about that, and the point about the follow-up point, which we'll see if everybody wants to address, about if there was some uncertainty among state and local officials about would there be more money coming, and that meant they needed to hold on to some of that CARES Act money. Congresswoman.
Thank you. Well, I think Senator Liias really highlighted a key point, which was that uncertainty. No one knew when more dollars might be coming, what it was going to be needed for throughout the communities. And frankly, that's why we were trying so hard to pass more relief earlier in the year, last year, so that there would be certainty. I think that predictability and certainty was so important. And that's why Democrats in the House were working so hard on the HEROES Act earlier last year, so that we could provide those resources and folks didn't have to wonder whether or not Congress would be able to pass additional legislation. The New Dems had also been pushing to put in place things like what we called automatic stabilizers, in particular for unemployment insurance, so that instead of waiting for Congress to act, we would use economic metrics to determine whether benefits should go up or down, so that there would be that predictability and certainty. So I think that's very important. It's disappointing that we weren't able to do more earlier, because Mitch McConnell wanted to put things on pause last year. But that's why this legislation right now is so critically important, and why we want to move quickly, because unemployment benefits as well expire on March 14th.
Can I just add something to that, Senator? Such great points, and or Congresswoman, such great points. But I think when it comes to why we didn't spend it all. First of all, the city we spent all of our very small allotment of money from the county, but I think we couldn't use it for lost revenue, and that being able to use this for lost revenue is very important, because that is the revenue we need to pay for our emergency responders, our first responders, our keeping our roads and everything safe. Again, remember how much revenue cities have lost, but the first relief dollars weren't able to be used in that way. It was only for COVID related expenses. And so it was a very different type of funding. And so to be able to use it for lost revenue so that we can continue to maintain core essential services rather than having to lay off hundreds of staff like I did, it really adds to our ability to serve our community.
Thank you. And I want to add too, in some of the conversations or rhetoric, you've heard this described as a blue state bailout. And that is just patently false, because there's a reason that the bipartisan U.S. Conference of Mayors endorses this. There's a reason that the bipartisan National Cities County Association, the National League of Cities, and I've not talked to a single Republican mayor who said, don't provide us aid. This has been going on for a year. And so when you have decreased revenues, increased expenses, you're going into your reserves or your rainy day fund, the money's not just going to come back magically when the economy starts to get better. And we still have people who aren't vaccinated yet. And so as I think about how the revenues get replenished, we have a duty to do this now. And as Congresswoman Delbene pointed out, there was the HEROES Act that was brought forth in May of last May, and nothing happened. And so the meager amount of funding that local communities got to begin with, and then this long period of a continued pandemic, and now coming in with relief, is exactly what we need to do. So this is nothing wasteful. This money will get spent, but we've been here for a year now, and I want to make sure that doesn't get lost on us.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Senator Liias, maybe give you one more opportunity before we wrap up.
Yeah, no, I just really appreciate the thoughtfulness that our delegation has put into this current package. And I think it really does speak to the missed opportunity last fall when families across Washington were struggling. And we saw the U.S. Senate fail to act. It's why we're so thrilled that Senator Murray and Senator Cantwell are in leadership positions now, because it does mean we won't have to face this uncertainty moving forward. Together with our amazing House delegation, we know that we're going to get the sustained support. I also just want to give a shout out to the infrastructure work that we see developing in Congress, because this relief is necessary now, but we've got to rebuild. And so I'm excited to see the House and Senate leaders already beginning to talk about what that next level of investment looks like, because it's not going to be enough to get out of this moment. We need to be sure that we're building strong into the long term. We've got needs for broadband infrastructure that this pandemic has demonstrated. Kids are doing their homework in parking lots. We've got needs for health system improvements to make sure that we address disproportionality in our healthcare system. We need more investments in our transportation infrastructure. Mayor Franklin and I care a lot about a bridge trestle on US 2 that is at risk of failure. We all in Western Washington care about I-5 at the Columbia River. So we need to make these more fundamental investments to make sure our state is strong and healthy into the long term. So I'm excited that we're talking about more relief now, and I'm excited that Congress is already focused on the next set of investments that we need to be strong and build back better into the long term. I know our congressional delegation knows they have strong partners here in Olympia. We're excited to have strong partners like Mayor Franklin and other amazing leaders, and just really grateful to NewDEAL for bringing us together to highlight what these investments mean in our communities here in our state. I'm excited to be on this team, and we're going to do everything we can to help families and small businesses and communities that are struggling both get through this moment, but also build back better into the future.
Senator, so well said. I know we're up against time. I see there was one more question about how long do cities, counties, and states have to spend the money? I don't know if anybody has a quick answer to that. And if not, Jerry, I'm sure we can get that to you right after this event. But if somebody wants to weigh in on that before we wrap up, I want to give that opportunity.
I don't know if there's a technical answer to this written into the legislation, but I would say however long it takes to recover from this pandemic.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Strickland. Thank you, Congresswoman Delbene, Senator Liias, Mayor Franklin. Just so thrilled to have all of you with us, and for all the hard work you guys are all doing for your communities, for Washington State. We're just in the New Deal, so grateful to the New Democrat coalition in Congress that's just been fighting so hard for state and local officials and listening and hearing the needs of state and local officials on the ground, fighting this pandemic and trying to address them at a time when they are facing more challenges perhaps than ever before. And the New Deal just urges, of course, the Senate to pass the funding that was in the House bill as it was designed to ensure state and local officials have the support they need to help their communities recovered. So again, thank you so much for members of the media. Will follow up with a technical answer on that last question, but please also reach out to us if you have further questions. But with that, just thank you again to everyone for joining us and hope to see you all again soon.
Thank you.